IVM.
Hi everybody, just wanted to ask everyone for a quick favor. We're running a brand survey right now and would really appreciate it if you could let us know what you think about the advertising on IVM. Go to ivmpodcast.com/survey and do let us know. As part of this, we'll be selecting 10 random participants and sending them some IVM swag, so do fill out those surveys.
Hello and welcome to the Habit Coach podcast. I'm Ashdin Doctor, your habit coach, and today we're going to be talking about something that I'm very, very passionate about because this is something that has helped me tremendously in my life. So as many of you know, I wasn't always this fit and this active like you know me now. There used to be a time when I was extremely sedentary, and there were phases of my life when I had a backache every single day of my life. And after I went on to this journey of understanding myself, a large part of it was spent with physiotherapists, understanding the body, because I found that absolutely fascinating. So I think physiotherapy is a very important and essential part of our life. And it is something that we should be thinking about in a more active manner. So today with me, I have Dr. Nikhil Latey. And I met Dr. Nikhil, I think a week ago or 2 weeks ago, when I went there with a pain in my knee. And I loved his perspective on the body and understanding how, the body functions. And we had a great time chatting. So I said, you have to come on the Habit Coach podcast and share this with us. So Nikhil, welcome to the Habit Coach podcast.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
My pleasure. Nikhil, tell us a little bit about yourself. What is it that, you've studied? What is it that you do?
So I'm a physiotherapist and a sports scientist. I've got a degree in physio and sports science. And this all stemmed from my, I used to be a short distance swimmer. Somehow I went into long distance and I really excelled in it. And this is all in my school days. So at that point I wondered that if somebody had told me earlier that, okay, your body is more suited for endurance type events rather than sprint type events, I might have been able to do more. So I thought, okay, let's do this. And so it's the job of a sports scientist to do all kinds of assessments and figure out what you're good at and where you lack. And this is more than 2 decades ago. There was no sports science in India. So the closest thing that came to it was physio. And I really enjoyed it. So I decided to do physio first, and then I went abroad and did my sports science. And after I came back, I got the opportunity to work with our Olympic level athletes. I've been to the London and Rio Olympics myself. I was working with Mary Kom for the London Games. I was working with some of the shooters for the Rio Games. And I've worked with Saina Nehwal in between when she became world number 1. So it's been a fantastic experience working with these athletes. And if I was to say what my work looked like with them, it was all about taking care of them, whether it is their strengthening, whether it is their flexibility, whether it is their recovery, whether it is taking care of small aches, pains and niggles, watching sometimes, because I was alone there, I did not have a team with me, watching their diet, how many hours they slept, if they had enough water. And so that whole part and parcel of taking care of their bodies like a body mechanic was my job when I worked with the athletes. Now that I have sort of given that up because it's too taxing, it's too tiring. 2 Olympics was my limit. Now I'm able to do physio and sports science as 2 separate stuff, where in physiotherapy I'm looking at injury care, preventing injuries, improving strength, getting people back on their feet, getting people back into their sport. And sports science is where once you're back into your sport, I sort of figure out what's holding you back and how you can improve further. And I'm able to help not only elite athletes now come to me instead of me running after them, but also amateur athletes who would say want to improve their half marathon time or a full marathon time. So that's what I do at the moment.
Fantastic. So, Nikhil, when you were talking, it suddenly struck me about when you were talking about the sports science part of it. And you were telling us about, that I was designed to be a long distance swimmer instead of a short distance sprint swimmer.
Yeah.
So is this also the whole role of genetics coming into it at that point of time? Or is this something that...
In a way, it is genetically predetermined, but as with anything, it's nature and nurture. Just because you're naturally gifted doesn't mean you succeed. You have to put a lot of effort into it to hone that talent and make it awesome. So if you do genetic tests, and they are quite freely available nowadays. You can do genetic testing on 8-year-old, 10-year-old, 12-year-old, and it may say that okay, you would do well in a power event, okay, like weightlifting or sprinting, but it can't say whether weightlifting or sprinting will work for you. Right? Because there are other factors that determine whether you're going to be a good weightlifter or a good sprinter, although both are power events. So there's a lot that goes into it. It's not just nature; it's also nurture. Yeah.
Correct. Because there are so many times, and probably we'll discuss this on the second podcast, but there are so many friends of mine whose genetic test came back saying that they'll be fantastic for sprinting, but they started doing long distance because they enjoyed the peace of the long distance,
Yes.
right? And the meditation of that, what they feel in the long distance running. Whereas my genetic test came and said that good for short distance, and I love my sprinting. I can't do long distance at all. So I completely understand that there is a nurture part of it as well. Other aspects apart from the genetics. Very, very interesting. So Nikhil, when you say a physiotherapist, right? I love the way you said a mechanic for the body.
Yeah.
Correct? So how should people think of physiotherapy? Like, there are lots of people who are listening to this podcast. They're not necessarily interested in getting into sports or becoming elite level athletes. Some are, but not all. For the people who aren't, how should they start thinking about physiotherapy?
You should think of physios as someone who will help you in taking care of yourself. I think that's the main thing. A physio doesn't do the work for you. You have to put in the effort if you want a better quality of life. A physio is someone who will help you get onto the right path. So if you think about someone, I mean, all of us are in some way or the other working from home over the last 1 year. Human bodies aren't designed to sit for long hours. We are designed to move around. Like if you look at our bone structure, it goes via the back into the legs. That's how the weight transfers. So when you're sitting and the legs aren't taking any weight, the back takes most of the weight. That's not what you're designed to do. So over a period of time, you do end up with some kind of aches and pains. Now, at this point, a physio intervention may be necessary to help you understand what you're doing wrong in terms of your posture, in terms of building up the strength of your back to take this excess load, in terms of what kind of stretches can you do, or if you're going to work for 10 hours straight, when do you take a break, what do you do in that break so that your muscles rejuvenate and allow you to continue working for 10 hours without having any deleterious side effects. So a physio is someone who basically helps you get to the kind of quality of life that you want and gives you the right guidance in order to improve your strength, improve your function to do so. Now that is when you're talking about an active population who doesn't have diseases. If you have something like a knee arthritis, say a 65-year-old with knee arthritis on both legs, again, they do want a good quality of life. They do want to walk around. I mean, not now, but if they, when things open up, if they go abroad and, in Europe you have to walk a lot, they can't take those trips because walking becomes a chore. So a physio would be the one who sort of steps in, assesses how bad the damage is, helps improve the condition of the joint, helps improve the condition of the bone, helps him to improve the condition of the muscles, teaches you good habits, to-dos, not to-dos, so that you can get to the kind of quality of life you desire. We are not magicians. We can't reverse the damage that's already been done, but we can help the body adapt and adjust to it.
Lovely. So it is not about necessarily damage control. Damage control may be beyond repair, but it is about making sure that you don't get to the damage in the first place. Correct?
And if you do end up getting damaged, we help you learn how to adjust to it. Because most arthritic issues are age related, right? They are part of growing old. And nobody knows how to reverse age yet. So then you have to learn to live with it. And physios become your teachers in helping you learn to live with it and still have a productive and enjoyable quality of life.
What is the most kind of issues that you typically get from people who have a sedentary life? People who are not working out and going to the gym and all of that. We'll talk about that later. But right now, what are the kinds of issues that you mostly see from people who are sedentary in nature, job, table, chair?
So for the most part, when you are young, and when I say young, under the age of 25, you see nothing, right? Between the ages of 25 and 40, you might start seeing something. And that is because, yes, you may be sedentary, but you still have to go to work. You still have to catch a train or a bus. You still have to maybe climb a flight of stairs. And family responsibilities come in, family, child, taking care of that. So your load on the body increases. So although you're sedentary, you're happy to sit on a couch for hours and enjoy a good movie, the Snyder Cut maybe. And but then when responsibilities come in, and if you're not ready for it, the load on your body surpasses its capacity to adapt to it, and then you start seeing issues. Issues are typically related to neck and shoulder pain because of slouching for a long time. These muscles aren't really strong enough to take the load presented to them. The back muscles surprisingly are strong enough, but they aren't flexible enough and they can't adapt enough. So then flexibility and stiffness becomes a major issue with the back. And if you suddenly have to sit on the floor, get up, carry your child around, then you might start seeing issues with the knees or with the shoulders. But let's put it this way, if the load on your body is well within your body's capacity to adjust to it, I see no symptoms whatsoever. So if you're a couch potato and you're happy being a couch potato and you don't want to really go for a trek on a Sunday, then the chances are you probably won't get injured. But if you're a couch potato and you do end up walking a lot on one of the days and pushing your body well beyond its happy zone, what it's used to, then you will end up with symptoms.
Yeah, this strikes me so close to home because I remember maybe over a decade or more ago, I was a couch potato, right? And maybe 15 years ago, maybe around that time, I was a couch potato and I never actually had any body pain or anything. One fine day, we were going for a wedding to Delhi. And because of that, I had to pull out my bags from the conveyor belt, correct? So pulled out bags normally, okay, fine, reached the hotel. First night was fine. Next night onwards, I couldn't get off the bed.
Yeah.
Right. I think the entire wedding that I was supposed to go for, I missed because of this. And it is exactly what you said, right? You will never see something coming at you because your body has been trained for what it is meant to be doing, which is sitting on the couch, like you said, a couch potato. But as soon as you exert it in a way that, meaning would seem normal, but not what you're trained for, you actually get a sprain or a catch or something happens.
Yeah. In fact, there's a wonderful video on YouTube. Anyone who's listening, you should watch it. Just search for load versus capacity. That's it. That's the name of the video. Load versus capacity. And you'll see nice animation explaining this exact same thing. That as long as your body is doing something that it is used to, you'll be pain-free. When you do something that is outside your body's comfort zone, then and only then will you end up with any kind of injuries.
So, what are the things that a person who has a sedentary life should at least start doing according to you? Do you have a wish list that you wish that all your patients, clients that came to you had at least done this as a basic? What would that be?
I think recovery is one part that is always ignored by everyone. Because what we feel is rest le rahe, theek hai sab kuch, right? We are okay with that, but it goes a little deeper because your body needs a few things to repair itself, right? If you want to build a wall, you need bricks. Similarly, your body needs a few things to repair itself, and in their order of importance, there are 7 things in their order of importance. I'll repeat. Number 1 is your water intake. So if you're dehydrating yourself, and which is far more common than you would think because of air-conditioned environments in offices, because of work pressure, even if a bottle is right next to you, you end up forgetting having a sip. And glad to see you're having a sip.
Just reminded me, I'm picking up my bottle and taking a sip right now.
So people tend to forget that. And then dehydration is the worst thing you can do to your body's recovery system. Number 2 becomes sleep. Again, ever since we are kids, we are conditioned to sort of sacrifice our sleep. that you have an exam tomorrow, आज रात को जाग के पढ़ाई करना है या फिर कल सुबह जल्दी उठ के पढ़ाई करना है. In either case, you are sacrificing on your sleep. And I know there are a lot of theories that, okay, you spend a third of your life sleeping. If you can reduce it slightly, it will become more. But your body needs time to recover. When you're moving around, when you're working, when your muscles are undergoing wear and tear, the body can't repair them simultaneously. So when you're sleeping, when your body is in a relaxed state, that is when your recovery mechanisms can work well and improve your muscle function, improve the damage that has been done to the muscles as you work out. So sleep is, yeah.
Nikhil, tell us a little bit about, you've been working with the best athletes. How much do they sleep?
It depends on how hard they're working. So when I went with Mary Kom for the London Olympics, we used to make her sleep for 12 hours because that's how hard we were pushing her. She used to train for about an hour and a half in a day, half an hour in the morning, 1 hour in the afternoon. That's it, just 1.5 hours. But we were squeezing her so hard at such a high intensity that she required 10 hours of sleep at night and 2 hours after the morning session. And if she did not have 12 hours of sleep, then you would see that her muscles would get stiff and her movement would become slightly slow. So it completely depends on how hard you exert, and it also depends on age. So pre-puberty, post-puberty, I would recommend 7 to 8 hours of sleep. But kids between the age of 10 and 16, where their bodies are maturing, they're training, they're also studying, and they have other priorities like playing PS5, PS4, and all of those things. Their bodies are undergoing a lot of wear and tear, and you do need to sleep at least 8 to 9 hours. So teenagers actually require more sleep than pre-teens and adults.
Correct.
And if you're working hard, of course, you need more sleep. So on my list, number 1 was water intake. Number 2 was sleep. Number 3 is protein intake. A lot of us don't have enough protein. Pure non-vegetarians included, because the quantity tends to be smaller. And with the recent trend of going vegan is not bad. But if you do it by yourself without doing your research, then it is bad. So if you take the help of someone who knows what they're doing, like a nutritionist, or you yourself have spent time doing research to ensure that your new diet gives you the same nutrients that your previous diet was, everything is fine. But if your protein intake drops, then your muscles and your body is going to suffer. Proteins are the building blocks of life. All your antigens, antibodies, cell repair, cell division, all of that is proteins. So if your protein intake is low, your body actually uses the protein from your muscles to repair itself. Muscles come a little lower down in the pecking order. They are not absolutely important for survival.
Correct.
Okay, your immune system is. So low protein intakes are a problem. And the number 4 thing is vitamin D levels.
Can I add one more thing before that? So when you talk about protein, do you have a number that you suggest? How many grams per body weight, etc.? Or
so there is a rule of thumb that you need to have about 1 gram per kg body weight. So if you weigh 70 kilos, you need 70 grams of protein per day. But that's a rule of thumb. So if you're a sedentary person, you may get away with 0.8 grams per kg body weight. If you're a decently active person, you might need 1.2 grams per kg body weight. If you're very active, you might need close to 2 grams per kg body weight. So since I'm not a nutritionist, I won't step into this and give you absolutes. I'll say that the rule of thumb is about 1 gram per kg body weight.
Fair.
Yeah. And
yes. One more thing on this. Have you worked with vegan athletes?
Yes, I have.
Do you see a difference between vegan athletes and non-vegetarian athletes?
In athletes, yes. In normal people, no. In amateur athletes, I see no difference between people who have a proper vegan diet versus people who have a normal diet with meat and dairy and everything. I don't see that much of a performance difference, but with athletes, yes. Athletes who have suddenly turned vegan, I see a drop in performance. Because you have to remember, athletes are at the cutting edge of what human bodies can do, right? So eating, and a lot of athletes have weight limitations. Like in boxing, in weightlifting, in wrestling, you have weight categories. So you can't eat more to get the same amount of protein. You can't eat more to get the same amount of vitamins and minerals. Which is why it matters. If you are in a sport that is weight sensitive, and if you suddenly decide to change diet, it is a problem. Being vegetarian, where you are still taking dairy, and non-vegetarian, I've not seen that much of a difference. But between vegans and vegetarians, or vegans and non-vegetarians, I have seen a difference. But that is only in high performance athletes, where there are strict limitations on how much food you can eat, and also between two sessions, between morning training and evening training session, you need to recover that energy quickly. Between competitions, you have to recover energy quickly. If you take wrestlers, in a day they will have 3 or 4 fights, so they have to recover quickly from one bout to the next, to the next, to the next. Incidentally, most of our wrestlers are pure vegetarians. They don't eat meat, but they do have a lot of dairy. So that is how they get their protein and vitamins and minerals. And
Lovely.
they have won so many Olympic medals. So
Yeah, absolutely. So they will be using supplements. They'll be using the protein supplements and all of that as well. Yeah, it will be needed at that stage.
At
Lovely.
that stage, yes.
So you got protein. Then you were going on to the
number 4 would be vitamin D levels. Now, technically, you get vitamin D from the sun. When sunlight hits your skin manufactures vitamin D. Unfortunately, in cities like Mumbai and Delhi, because of the pollution, the right frequency of UV light doesn't reach us. And despite being in a sunny country, we don't get enough sun. Like if I was to step out in the sun right now, you can see a bit of my hands and a bit of my face would be exposed. The rest of it is covered. So all of us, especially in the last generation, I would say 20 years, 25 years, where, I mean, if you think about it, 20, 25 years ago, you had to walk from the station home. You had to walk from the bus stop home. Today, you get an Uber from doorstep to doorstep. So this walking in the sun, and just life has become a lot more hectic. So you do end up taking the Uber instead of walking. You don't get enough sun. And
Correct.
that's why vitamin D levels have crashed. And I find vitamin D to be a genuine issue in most people. Of course, in the last 1 year, thanks to COVID, I can't say thanks to COVID for anything else, but people have become more aware of vitamin D, and a lot of people have been taking supplements, hopefully under medical guidance and not by themselves. But things have sort of improved, and I hope they stay good. Number 5 is vitamin B12 levels. Again, that has been better in the last 1 year because people have been taking multivitamin supplements. And then the last 2 things, they don't actually help in recovery. Okay, like water, sleep, protein, vitamin D and vitamin B12 actually help your body recover fast. But the last 2 things prevent your body getting injured. And that is your stretching and strengthening. So if your muscle is strong enough and flexible enough, it undergoes lesser amount of wear and tear, and therefore it recovers faster because there's less to recover. That's the thing. So if people are just able to do these 7 things as well as you can, I would say my job will become a lot easier, and people would not need to see the physio as often, because if these 7 things are done perfectly, 90 to 95% of the unnecessary aches, pains and niggles, fatigue related issues, shin splints, back aches, neck pains would come down by a lot.
Very interesting. So get your water in, make sure that you have your bottle with you and you're drinking it. Don't just carry it around, because that's one of the habits, right? One of the first podcasts that we did was on hydration, and it was carry a bottle around. At least you see it, you'll drink it. Otherwise we normally think that I have to go to the kitchen, get a glass of water and drink it. Instead, just carry a bottle around. That's one. The second one is sleep. Doctor was saying that get, at least your, how many hours? 8 hours of sleep? That's a minimum?
50 hours a week, so around 7 hours each night.
7 hours each night is good. I typically focus on getting quality of sleep, because that's something that I keep harping about a lot, and how we get into our sleep and watching our sleep stages. That is something that we speak a lot about in the podcast. Then you spoke about getting your protein up. Protein is so important, building blocks. Then we spoke about vitamin D. Vitamin D has multiple functions, and I think as scientists, we're still also figuring out what are the new functions that vitamin D is doing. With many people think vitamin D is almost like a hormone in our body, so it's very plays lots of roles. As a good habit, please start wearing lesser clothes when you go out. I think that is the main takeaway from this podcast. Then we got vitamin B12. And vitamin B12 is an interesting one, right? Do you see a lot of difference between the different kinds of diets, like vegetarian, non-vegetarian diets with B12?
So I've seen vitamin B12 deficiency in both vegetarians and non-vegetarians. It's about the quality of food and how you prepare it and what all you eat. There is an interesting tidbit I'd like to share. So when I was working with elite athletes, I used to test them for 3 times every year. The blood tests would be done once every 4 months, because in high performance athletes you couldn't wait for the levels to start coming down and showing symptoms before you took a step in and improved them. So we had to watch them like a hawk and make sure their performance doesn't dip. And so initially when I started testing them, and I must have done over 5,000 tests across 200 athletes for so many years, all of them would show low vitamin D and B12, right? And then we worked with nutritionists, we worked with their parents or caretakers, and vitamin B12 levels went up and they stayed up. Okay, in about a year or so, I found everyone showed pretty good vitamin B12 levels, because it was just about managing some dietary habits and, making sure that you're taking a bit of nuts and something else. I mean, depending on what the person was eating, you could add a few things and it normalized. But vitamin D didn't. Vitamin D you get from the sun, you don't really get from food. So that has been a problem till today. But yeah, I mean, B12, I've not really seen a difference between vegetarians and non-vegetarians. It's a fallacy to think that vegetarians don't get enough. Yes, you do get enough. It's just that the way you prepare the food and what you eat matters a lot.
Correct. Absolutely. And like we were saying, that please take your vitamin D supplements, especially under the guidance of doctors, because they're fat soluble and hence can increase your toxicity if you aren't deficient. So use a doctor to guide yourself in that. How often do you think we should normally be testing our blood?
Once a year.
For
an average person, it should be part of your annual blood work. You should test for vitamin D and B12 as part of your annual blood work. If you're an athlete or an amateur athlete who wants to perform well, twice a year. If you're a high performance athlete, at least 3 times a year. Because with most of us, if the levels go down a bit and then we find out and we are able to correct it, it's okay. But for athletes, you can't allow it to go down before you take a step and improve it. You have to catch it before it goes down and affects performance. That's why.
Any specific tests that you conduct that you feel are important that most people don't cover in their regular blood work?
Vitamin D is one they miss out on because it's slightly more expensive. But once a year, I think it should be there as part of your annual workup. It's a bit more expensive test compared to your normal CBCs and blood sugars. But it's worth putting in the effort because, it's like pretty much if you take a room of 10 people, 9 of those will have vitamin D being low.
Yeah,
that's the case today.
Correct.
And incidentally, in the last 1 year, I mean, for the first since 2009, when I've been working with athletes and testing them regularly, till say 2020, so almost 11 years, I saw no one with vitamin D toxicity. Okay, and in the last 1 year, I've seen 3.
Oh wow!
So
why? Because everyone's obsessed with vitamin D. That's why.
Yeah, sort of. Where they went a bit overboard with vitamin D. I mean, the kind of literature that was coming out. Not verified literature, websites and WhatsApps and about vitamin D and COVID. And it was a very tense situation. So I don't blame them per se because all of us were found wanting last year. Nobody knew what to do or what to expect simply because it was an unknown phenomenon.
Yeah, and there are lots of people who are also saying that the current vitamin D guidelines are not up to scratch. We can actually tolerate far more, and all of those kind of messages was also were going around. So absolutely.
Yeah, but the thing is that I have seen symptoms when vitamin D goes above a certain level, and I have seen symptoms when it goes below a certain level. So I would rather believe what I have seen when I've worked with patients and rather than WhatsApp forwards.
WhatsApp University is not something that needs to be trusted. Completely agree with you. And then you spoke about 2 important things. You spoke about stretching and you spoke about exercise, right? And training or weight training in particular? Strength training. Strength training, correct? Maybe we'll lead this question into these last two, but what should a good quality muscle feel like?
So, from a physio perspective, when I touch a muscle, right, it should feel nice and soft. It should feel tender. Okay, and that's a good quality muscle without any. I mean, the texture of the muscle when you feel it needs to be nice and smooth and soft. If the muscle texture is different, it tells its own story. If it is a bit taut, then it might be overworked or not recovered well. If it is quite taut, then there might be a little bit of swelling inside. If there are knots on the muscle, those are localized areas of swelling, also called as trigger points. Or there may be fatigue along with weakness, along with swelling. So it feels like one of Bombay's roads, khad, 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 khad. When you roll your finger over the muscle, it feels, as smooth as a Mumbai road. So then every single muscle, when you touch it, sort of tells you its history. And if you're practiced enough, if you're skilled enough as a physio, when you touch the muscles, you can almost sort of tell the person what they did wrong and why the muscle picture looks the way it does. Because, the muscles tell a story on what's happened to them.
Beautiful. How can people start feeling this, or at least getting aware of this with their own body? Do you think that there are certain muscles that they should take a look at and maybe understand versus the others? This is just for a self-understanding. It's not for diagnosis or anything.
To be honest, it becomes really hard. Like if I have a calf pain, calf is a muscle I can easily palpate on myself. But I'm not able to feel it as well as I would in a patient. Simply because maybe I'm not standing in the right position, or there's a personal bias coming in. So I wouldn't recommend that people start touching and feeling their muscles and making conclusions, because if I'm not able to do it on myself, it would be ridiculous for me to expect somebody else to do it. Having said that, when you are doing any kind of exercises, you should notice how does it feel while doing the exercise. Does it feel smooth? Does it feel controlled? Or do you have to push that extra bit to cover the entire range of motion? When you start the exercise, does the muscle feel stiff? If your muscle feels stiff when you start exercising, either it's tired or you have not warmed up enough, right? If when you're doing the exercise, and normally say you were doing a full squat, but today when you're doing a full squat, all the way down, all the way up, right at the point where you start going up, your muscle feels a little weak, or your knee starts giving you a signal that it is hurting, then that probably points to the fact that the muscle is not able to generate enough power when it is needed. And that's why the joint is getting overloaded, which means you're tired. So you have to pay attention. So I hate it when people go to gyms and they're not paying attention to what they're doing. They're distracting themselves. Either they're walking on the treadmill, watching something on a screen, or they're listening to loud music. Yes, it keeps some people it works, it keeps them focused, it keeps them attention centered. But a lot of the time, you're not listening to your body. So if you just start listening to your body, listening to the cues that it is telling you, your body will tell you if it is tired. Your body will tell you if it doesn't want to be pushed as hard as you're pushing it on that day. Maybe it will be ready tomorrow, but not today. So if you just try and listen to your body when you're working out, focusing on your body will tell you when you're, pardon my French, but being an ass. Okay? And if you're able to listen to that and do what your body demands of you, I think you'll have a much more pleasurable time, pain-free, injury-free, and you'll find improvements in whatever goals that you have set for yourself.
This is such a beautiful thing because, and doctor, I'd love it if you could talk about this a little bit more. The whole idea of this whole mind-muscle connect, right, when you're doing an exercise. There's so many times when you see people in the gym who are going through the motion, but that the attention is not on the muscle that's supposed to be worked, right? They're going through the motion. The weight is coming up. It looks proper from outside, but that mind-muscle connect is not there. How should we establish that? Are there any habits or any tips that you have on creating that mind-muscle connect?
It's not that hard. You just have to pay attention. That's it. You just have to pay attention. So if you're doing a bicep curl, you need to feel the bicep muscle contracting. Okay, yes, you can see your form in the mirror, you can see your form sideways in the mirror, but you need to be able to feel the muscle contracting. Like, for example, if you were standing on one leg, okay, and you closed your eyes, okay, how do you maintain balance? You maintain balance because your brain listens to the information coming from your ankle, and therefore it balances your wide body on a tiny foot. Correct? So that is what I mean. Just pay attention to what information your body is sending you. That's
Correct.
it. It's not hard. There's no magic bullet there. It's like the notice is in front of you. All you have to do is read it. It's as simple as that. Having said that, people, when they are working out, they don't want to use too much of brain power. They just want to focus on doing the activity, right? Which is great for my business because you end up doing technical mistakes and get injured. But if you just pay attention to what you're doing, I think you'll get far better results.
This is beautiful. And this is something that I think we should definitely speak about in the second podcast when we discuss this and dive into this in detail. I just wanted to focus on these last two bits, which were the strength training and the stretching. Right? Are there any tips you have on how to do the stretching correctly?
So the kind of stretch you do in warm-ups and cool-downs is slightly different. So during your warm-ups, the stretch can't be too hard because your muscles are cold and cold muscles don't stretch well. So you have to listen to your body. When you feel the stretch, you have to stop. And when you're cooling down, when the body is already warm, then you can stretch a little harder. But when you're doing a self-stretch, whether it's your calf, hamstrings, buttocks, what have you, first is you maintain correct body position. That's number one. There's no compromise on technique ever. And second is, when you're doing the stretch, it should feel like a stretch and not pain. So when you start stretching a muscle, you'll go through the range where there's no pain, no stretch. Then you start feeling a little bit of stretch. Then the stretch increases. Then it becomes discomfort, and then it becomes pain. Right? You'll go through this entire range when you start stretching a muscle. When you're doing it yourself, you need to stop when you feel the stretch properly, without discomfort, without pain. So that you're not pushing the muscle beyond its limit. Pay very good attention. It should not hurt. It should feel like a stretch, and you hold it for 15 to 20 seconds. And if you want, you do 4 repetitions of it, but don't do high intensity stretch which pushes you into the pain zone.
Very interesting. So don't push it to the point of pain. Take 20 seconds and think about it as repetitions.
Yeah.
So you might want to do 3 repetitions or 4 repetitions of 20 seconds, 20 seconds, 20 seconds. Yeah. I know stretching is something that I suck at. This is something that I always do a gapcha on when I finish my workout. So I know this is one of the things that I have to focus on. And the second thing I do my gapcha on is the warm-ups, because I started working out and I was like, I don't need warm-ups. What is the point of a warm-up? Do you think a leopard needs a warm-up before it goes and chases its prey? I am a machine. I don't need a warm-up. What is the point of a warm-up? And why do animals don't need a warm-up before they start running?
Who says animals don't do a warm-up?
Do they? I'm now picturing my cheetah doing like toe touches and windmills and leg swings. Windmills.
But you can see the cheetah, crouching and just studying its prey and properly analyzing the distance and the speed it needs to generate. And then finally it sets off. So there's a huge adrenaline rush as well. Now, if you were the prey and the cheetah was coming after you, you won't need a warm-up. Because you would have such a huge adrenaline rush in your body that everything would go into 5th gear and you would be able to run hard. And at the end of the day, it's about survival versus leisure. Okay, so when we are training, when we are working out, it's more of from a health perspective and more for leisure. Okay, our survival doesn't depend on picking up a dumbbell. But for a cheetah, if he or she doesn't manage to catch their prey, it is a matter of survival. Like they say, if you want to swim fast, swim in front of a shark. Please don't do that, but it's just a saying.
Correct. And so what is the quality of a good warm-up then? Like you said about stretching, what is a good quality for warm-up?
So a good warm-up usually consists of two parts, general and a specific warm-up. A general warm-up is, just limbering up, moving your shoulders, doing a little bit of a jog or a cycle, just to get the body temperature up, get the heart rate and the blood pressure up, get your sweat going slightly. And a specific warm-up would be where you do the movement that you're going to do in your training session. So say, for example, if you're doing legs today, then you might want to do bodyweight squats as part of your specific warm-up before taking a barbell on your shoulders.
Okay, so general warm-up, basically getting the blood pumping, getting the body a little warmer, which is where the word comes from, and then putting in the correct motions that you want, getting the right muscles to fire in that context, which is the specific warm-up for the exercise that you're doing.
Yeah, that also reinforces your technique, because when you're doing specific warm-up, you're trying to follow the same technique that you would when you're actually working out. And here I'm talking about a legs workout, but that would also qualify when you're, say, playing football or playing tennis, where you do shadow movements to mimic the movements you would be doing in the sport, but at a much lesser intensity, to get the mind-body connection firing, to get the muscles used to moving in those specific patterns, and but without loading them too much, without putting in the intensity, because they're not ready for it.
Lovely. This is such a fascinating discussion, because I love the way that we are talking about physiotherapy. Normally physiotherapy, especially with people and clients that I work with, they're like, Ashdin, I have this pain and stuff. So you go to a physio, yeah, he's given me some exercise, but I've not done this. And one is like what you said, not doing the exercise is completely useless. But we spoke about so many different aspects of our life, like recovery, how to start thinking about it. And I think, the purpose of this podcast was to pick up these nuggets and use them, because these are things that we can do without actually a physiotherapist coming and telling us do these exercises. We can focus on these 7 parts in our life. And at least this itself will dramatically improve the quality of our life. And that is what we need ultimately. So Nikhil, thank you so much for coming and chatting with us on the Habit Coach podcast. How can people get in touch with you? How can people learn more about all that you do?
You can follow me on my social media handles. It's Pro Physio Mumbai, PROPHYSIO MUMBAI. I'm there on Facebook, LinkedIn, on Insta. And I also have a website, prophysio.co.in. So you can send me messages on any of the social media handles and I'll respond to it.
Lovely. And if you're in Bombay, I strongly suggest going and meeting Dr. Nikhil, especially if you have an issue. Just figure it out, learn about it. And like I did, I learned so much in our first meeting. So I'm looking forward to our second. Thank you so much, Nikhil.
Thank you.
If you like this podcast, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can listen to us on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com. You can also follow us on social media. We are at IVM Podcasts on Twitter and Instagram. If you want to reach out to me, I am Ashdin Doc on Twitter and Instagram. You can find lots more information on my website, awesome180.com, or check out different content on my YouTube channel called AWESOME180. That's Awesome 180.
I hope you enjoyed that show. Let me tell you a little bit about what happened on the IVM Podcast Network this week. On Cyrus Says, Cyrus was joined by Irfan Pabani, who is an old friend of his. They talk about the rich flavors of Indian food and Parsi food specifically. He was also joined by author and historian William Dalrymple. They discuss literature, history, and the culture of the Indian subcontinent. And let me give you a few quick things to check out. Chuck, aka Deepak Gopal Krishnan of Simplified and the Origin of Things fame, has Rohan Joshi, formerly of AIB, on his show. Also on this round is on me. Gautam Purohit of Thakur's Bhojnalaya was on. On the note, Maruk and I talks about the cabinet reshuffle. And do check out Global Victoria Tech Talks. We talk about the booming gaming and edutech industries in Australia. Do follow us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram to keep up what's going on the network. And I'd like to finally thank our sponsors on the network this week, Cred, Ciet, and Global Victoria. Thank you so much for making this possible.
पेश खिदमत है आपकी शान में हमारे अंजुमन से. Hi, I am Sadaf.
And I'm Arshit. खाने का इतिहास, economics, policy, psychology, सब है मेन्यू पे.
Only on the Nankali podcast every Wednesday, सिर्फ IVM podcast app या वेबसाइट पर, या फिर जहां से भी आप अपने पॉडकास्ट सुनते हो.
Feeling overwhelmed, anxious, struggling with too many obstacles, don't know where your life is headed? Well, if you are dealing with one or all of these, tune into the Positively Unlimited podcast, because in each episode, I share a life lesson, a life hack, a pro tip that can help you get your life back on track. All episodes are available on the IBM website, IBM Podcast app, or wherever it is that you get your podcast from.